Hi, ELH here, Game Master of Euthenia, Dark Avatar, the whole works. I wanted to sit down and talk about what I originally had planned for the Euthenia game because I have been driving towards a narrative for about 4 years now when it comes to Star Trek Adventures. There's been hints in every single of my 18 Star Trek Adventures campaigns that would have ultimately culminated at the end of Euthenia before Euthenia stopped being a thing. So, yeah, Euthenia stopped being a thing, and I thought that I owed you all a video, and I thought someone should at least hear the overview of the story, because, let's be honest, you know, all that work needs to have some payoff, otherwise what's the point? So, long story short, where we last left off with the Euthenia crew, we had it so the crew had just received a revelation from the black hole entities, specifically Invalid, a brother, sister, sibling of Null and Void and all of the other black hole entities I've ever introduced. But long story short, Invalid basically told the players, hey, the Vergeon used to be working with my people. Things got out of hand, the Vergeon suddenly attacked our people, and now an overwhelming majority of the black hole entities are trying to kill the Vergeon, and the Vergeon are obviously not happy with that. So the initial plot thread was going to be that the players were going to investigate what was going on with the Vergeon, and to do that, they were first going to go to a planet that Vizeth had ties to of some sort. Now, we didn't get time or really any way to sort of suss out what that would have meant, but something would have tied him and given him a connection to this planet. And what was going on this planet was a plague, a virus, some medical emergency that only the Euthenia could solve because they weren't Vergeon. They weren't, for lack of a better term, they weren't sort of horse-blinded to gene modification to solve their problems. So the Euthenia was going to come in, they were going to be the big Federation heroes, and they were going to get an in with the Vergeon. And in doing so, they would start to get hints that not all was well with the Vergeon. And what I mean by that is there was going to be hints that the leadership of the Vergeon, the supreme authority figures that led the entire species, they started acting erratically some time ago, specifically the area of time in which, supposedly, the Vergeon started the war against the black hole entities. So, that was then going to send them to another planet, another Vergeon planet, where this time, this was an archive planet. This was something where the Vergeon had stored not just data information in terms of like a computer, but also a gene bank, as it were, sort of a medical facility that was a collection of every single gene mod they had ever made. And in doing so, the Euthenia crew was going to find that the records had been tampered with, not just the computer ones, but also the biological ones. However, they were going to be able to find a hint that someone of authority figure, supreme authority figure in the Vergeon, had deliberately changed one of the low-level gene mods in the Vergeon species to make them a little bit more subservient, a little bit less questioning, in general easier to control. But at the time, and even after perfect, some study of this, the only reason the Euthenia crew was going to know that this was the outcome was because, well, they had a really good doctor at the time, if I'm being honest, and they had a really good, medical staff. But anyway, point being, they were going to find evidence, and that evidence was then going to allow them to do one of a few things. They could have approached another Vergeon ship and be like, hey, look, we found this. We know it's real. Take a look at this. And that, again, would have come through a connection of Vizeth's, and it would have provided a way for the players to, for lack of a better term, get more inroads, because the more inroads they ended up getting, the better. And there was going to be about 2, 3, maybe even 4 sessions of them just making allies within the Vergeon when it came to when it came to factions, when it came to just people who were friendly or not friendly with the Vergeon, and this was going to start building up until there was a literal fleet of ships that was going to embark to the Vergeon homeworld to more or less confront the supreme authority figures. And in all of this, there was going to be a subplot of the mushroom cure, or the fungal cure, however the hell you say it, that Vizeth and Razib had developed that counteracted some of the metaphysical and extra-physical effects that a black hole entity had on ships. That fungal cure was going to be how to prevent or counteract the Supreme Authority's, well, Supreme Authority. And that was going to, again, sort of push them towards the Vergeon homeworld, because once you convert the Vergeon homeworld to your side, the rest of the Empire will follow. But obviously, you know, it can't just always work out for the Euthenia crew. What was going to happen was it was going to be a big standoff, and the Euthenia was going to find themselves, even with the fleet at their back, supremely outgunned, supremely outmaneuvered, and it was going to be one of those situations like in the third Lord of the Rings movie, where they're going to start gearing up for a charge, the final charge, as it were. And maybe that involves the wave motion gun, maybe it doesn't. But as they're gearing up for this final assault, this final charge, whatever it is, there's a hail that's going to come in from outside the galaxy. And lo and behold, the USS Leviathan, the Universe class that I had created back in the Amalthea game and has shown up a few times in my games. But the Universe class USS Leviathan was going to say, "We're en route, we'll be there in 15 minutes, just hold on." And that next 15 minutes would have played out and been a more cinematic space battle. I don't think I would have ever gone into a full fleet combat, because that would have just been way too much work. But it was going to be dire. It was going to injure people. It was going to be one of those situations where maybe it even gets to the point where the Euthenia starts firing the wave motion gun because that's all they can do, just to take out targets of opportunity. But it gets worse for the Euthenia crew, because as part as all this is happening, a conduit similar to a wormhole or similar to a transwarp conduit opens up in the skies above the Vergeon homeworld, and out of it comes a maniacal laughter. At which point, had Stetko still been around, Stetko would have instantly identified that that was Zero, that Zero had finally gotten through the Great Galactic Barrier, and that ultimately it was now not only a fight to retake the Vergeon mines, but a way to stuff Zero back where he came from. So, in using that conduit, the Leviathan would have come in to the galaxy, you know, bypassing the Great Galactic Barrier. They used that conduit to come in. They would have disgorged a number of ships. The original Adiona, a few callbacks to the Amalthea. Basically, I had originally reached out to many of my past players that I have good rapport with, and I told them, hey, look, you know, could you come and do a cameo of like 5-10 minutes in, you know, in like 8 to 10 weeks? Could you do it? And ultimately what they told me was, yeah, we can do it, and we were very excited for it. So again, what that was going to turn into was Zero's going to be wreaking havoc, doing Q-like things, throwing around asteroids, throwing around planets, etc., etc. The Leviathan and the supporting fleet are going to be keeping the pressure off of Euthenia. And Euthenia had to make a choice, or was going to have to make a choice, where they can either wave motion gun Zero and more or less destroy him, in a sense, or they can go for the Supreme Authority first and hope that once the Supreme Authority is converted, or otherwise not brainwashed by Zero anymore, they can maybe use the greater Vergeon weapons to ensure Zero's destruction. And honestly, I don't know how that would have gone. I think it could have gone multiple ways, and hell, maybe the Euthenia wouldn't even made it to that far. Because when it comes to Zero's corruption of the Supreme Authority, it ran deep. It ran very deep. Like, we're talking bluegill levels, if you remember that one episode of TNG where Picard and Riker go and almost kill half the Admiralty. But it was going to be a similar vein where a lot of things were up in the air. I was just going to let the dice and roleplay take us where it wanted to go. But again, things happened, and The Euthenia group is no longer a thing, and we'll never get that final conclusion that I've been driving to since the original Arcadia game, almost 4 years ago at this point. So that's the end of Phase 1. That's the end of Phase 1 of the ELH universe, and you might be wondering, well, ELH, where do you go from here? Honestly, I'm not sure. It's pretty clear that the Tuesday group is no longer going to be a thing in any capacity. So if I do run another Tuesday game of Star Trek Adventures, it's going to be with entirely new people, which probably is a good thing, but it's going to take me time. I'm going to need at least a month to do applications, interviews, vetting, session zeros to make sure everybody's fitting well together. It might even take 2-3 months, to be honest. But ultimately, I do want to at least share my enthusiasm that I already know how I want to start Phase 2, as it were, and I want it to be set in the year 2195 aboard a newly constructed Walker class of starships. And the reason I'm doing that is because there's now, at least in my opinion, there is now a second lost era when it comes to Star Trek. The original lost era was obviously that portion between TOS and TNG, but this sort of second lost era is between Enterprise the show and Discovery the show. And it's a pretty significant gap, all things considered. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it was something where by the time the Walker class in question is coming off the shipyard fresh, like first of its kind of a thing, it's something like 60, 70 years until Discovery happens. So there's a lot of time to play with there. There's a lot of cool things we can do with the Walker class, and I think that game in general with the right people will be a really fun time. But that's all I really have to say at the moment. I did originally consider doing this video live, but ultimately I figured that just a quick 10-minute video, 13-minute video, would suit everyone's needs better than me constantly being interrupted by chat. So apologies that this wasn't exactly live, but hopefully at least some of you now have some closure. Some of you know what I was planning to do, and hell, maybe you can make up your own ending in your imagination where things were supposed to go. But yeah, that's it for me, at least for a while. I'd say things get better, but I don't know at this point. Have a good one, everybody.